As a new assistant principal responsible for discipline, I used a more top-down leadership approach. Now, it was a leadership style that served me well as a military officer. While the approach worked well with students, it didn't achieve the desired outcome with my colleagues. So, after several frustrating team meetings, I decided to try a different approach. Instead of telling my colleagues how to increase our effectiveness and improve their production, I changed tactics. I basically started asking more questions, choosing to focus on understanding their perspectives instead of telling them what to do. In addition, I would create the agenda to ensure the meetings stayed on track, and my boss empowered me to run the meetings. Well, I'm proud to say, as a result, our discussions were more productive, more student-focused, and more consistent with our discipline policy. So today, I want to talk about the strategic imperative of collaborative leadership. You see, there's a concerning misconception in educational leadership that collaborative leadership is simply a kinder, gentler approach to school management, a nice alternative to authoritarian styles. Well, I'm here to tell you that this fundamental misunderstanding diminishes what research consistently shows is actually a strategic advantage in today's educational environment. You see, collaborative leadership isn't about being nice. It's about being effective. The challenges facing today's schools, from addressing pandemic learning loss to navigating cultural divisions, from implementing emerging technologies to addressing persistent equity gaps, are too complex for any single leader to solve alone. These challenges require collective intelligence, diverse perspectives, and distributed expertise, which only collaborative leadership can activate. As Harris and Jones note in their comprehensive study of high-performing school systems, the most significant predictor of sustained school improvement wasn't the charisma or vision of individual principals, but rather their ability to cultivate leadership capacity throughout their organizations. This finding fundamentally shifts our understanding of educational leadership from an individual capability to an organizational one. So I want to talk about 3 collaborative leadership practices that build individual and collective capacity. The first practice is strategic decision, rights mapping. Now, that's a mouthful, but let me explain. Because strategic decision rights mapping explicitly identifies which decisions are made where, by whom, and through what process. So unlike traditional delegation, which often happens haphazardly, this practice clarifies decision-making authority across the organization. Research by Leafwood and team demonstrates that when schools implement clear decision rights frameworks, they experience 28% higher staff engagement and significantly faster implementation of improvement initiatives. So you start this by categorizing decisions into 4 types: those requiring broad input, but central decision-making, those appropriate for delegation with parameters, those for completely distributed decision-making, and those requiring consensus. The most common barrier is leaders' fear of relinquishing control. So to address that, start with lower stakes decisions and establishing clear feedback loops. You see, when implemented effectively, you'll notice faster decision making, reduced meeting fatigue, greater staff ownership of initiatives, and fewer decisions being unnecessarily elevated to senior leadership. The second practice is networked improvement communities. So using structured improvement cycles, networked improvement communities bring together cross-functional teams focused on specific school challenges. Now, unlike traditional committees, these communities use discipline inquiry processes to test changes, gather data, and scale effective practices. Research shows these structured collaborative approaches solve problems 3 to 4 times faster than traditional top-down initiatives. So begin with a clearly defined problem of practice that matters to students and staff. Establish diverse teams with complementary expertise and provide them with protected time and simple improvement protocols. Will you face resistance? Of course. So let's talk about that. You see, common resistance comes from skepticism about one or more initiative. So to counter this, you connect improvement work to existing priorities rather than adding new ones. Effective implementation results in evidence-based solutions to persistent problems, staff who increasingly uses data in decision-making, and the emergence of teacher leaders who facilitate improvement work. The third practice is transparent resource allocation systems. So transparent resource allocation systems involve stakeholders in understanding, prioritizing, and distributing limited resources of time, money, staffing, based on shared values and evidence. So unlike top-down budgeting, these systems build collective ownership of difficult trade-off decisions. Harris and D. Flaminis found that schools using collaborative resource allocation increased resource alignment with strategic priorities by 32%. So create simple visualization tools that make resource allocation visible and understandable. Establish clear criteria for prioritization based on student needs and strategic goals. The main barrier is typically discomfort with transparent discussion of resources. Overcome this by focusing initially on new resources rather than reallocating existing ones. Look for resource discussions that reference evidence and student needs rather than historical patterns. Increase understanding of budgetary constraints across stakeholders and more innovative approaches to resource challenges. Now, I've shared a lot of information concerning practices, and I know you're wondering, what is the benefit? So let's talk about building leadership resilience through collaboration, because that's a benefit. You see, collaborative leadership doesn't just produce better decisions. It builds more resilient leaders and organizations. When leadership is distributed, the organization becomes less dependent on any single individual, creating natural succession pathways and sustainability during transitions. For individual leaders, collaboration creates crucial load sharing during crises. Research by Fullen found that principals practicing collaborative leadership reported 37% lower burnout rates and 42% higher job satisfaction than those operating from traditional management approaches. These leaders described having both practical support during challenges and emotional ballast during storms as significant factors in leadership retention. I know you're asking, well, what is the evidence of impact? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because the research connecting collaborative leadership to school outcomes is compelling. A 5-year study of 134 schools by Sebastian and team found that schools with strong collaborative leadership practices demonstrated 24% higher teacher retention rates, significant improvements in school climate measures, more successful implementation of improvement initiatives, and higher student achievement growth, particularly for historically underserved students. As you can see, these findings held true regardless of school size, demographic composition, or resource levels, suggesting that collaborative leadership provides universal advantages rather than context-dependent benefits. So now you get to be a participant in this podcast because you're going to take the collaborative leadership self-assessment. I want you to rate your current practice and be honest on each dimension from 1, which is rarely, to 5 consistently. Are you ready? Number 1, I have clear processes for determining which decisions should be made where. Number 2, staff at all levels can articulate how decisions are made in our school. Number 3, we have structured approaches for solving problems collaboratively. Number 4, resource allocation reflects our strategic priorities rather than historical patterns. Number 5, multiple staff members lead significant aspects of our school improvement work. Number 6, I intentionally develop leadership capacity in others. Number 7, we celebrate collective achievements more prominently than individual ones. And number 8, I regularly seek and act on feedback from diverse stakeholders. Now, scores of 30 plus suggest strong collaborative leadership practices. Scores below 24 indicate significant opportunities to strengthen your collaborative approach. Remember, shifting to collaborative leadership isn't about abandoning your responsibility as a leader. It's about multiplying your impact by activating the full capacity of your organization. Phil Jackson, former NBA coach who led teams to 11 NBA championships, said, "The strength of the team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team." So, what's one collaborative practice you could strengthen this month?